So this is going to be tough for me because I'm a walker, so I'm going to be weaving in and out of the chairs. But the first thing I should say is thanks to Alistair, because I feel proud to be American. That's humor, sorry. But sometimes I can be caught now saying, I refer to myself as a North American, and sometimes being posed as a Canadian, eh? That doesn't really work either, right? So I was in the States for 10 days, so a little bit jet lagged. But the point is, like, I woke up this morning at 4 a.m., and I said, dude, you got a big day, you got to go back to sleep, right? And I still can't, I don't know why, I still refer to myself as dude in the third person. I've been in New Zealand for about 17 years, and I've been doing a lot around innovation and change, right? That's kind of my area, and we talked a lot about political risk. In a way, I think some of the things that are happening around what Mitchell talked about are bigger risks in understanding what that emergent future looks like. So I spent the last 10 days at MIT in Boston talking to Otto Schrammer about transformation models, and I'll go through that a little bit. The other thing I'd like to talk about, too, is the OECD has come up 3 months ago, talked about innovation in New Zealand, and they were quite scathing that we're not investing enough in innovation. And it's kind of critical. And what I'm about to go through is a presentation. It's not about being right. It's not about being wrong. I'm just kind of posting some concepts out there in terms of that emergent future that we really need to start thinking about. Now, imagine I went for this is a really busy slide, and there's a lot of buzzwords. So most of this stuff I'm pretty passionate about in terms of talking to you about what it means, but I can't because I don't have enough time. The reality is, if I look at the blue up there, we got big data, right? Big, whatever that means. We got a whole bunch of data. Then we're going to use advanced analytics to take the good stuff out of it, and then we'll probably build some predictive algorithms, right? And build AI and automation or business process automation. Those things are all happening, and I'm working with a local insurance company to look at what that means to my business. And we talk about design thinking, about customer centricity and cloud computing and new business models and climate change and agile and bimodal, the concept bimodal. We used to live in this kind of tightly integrated, tightly coupled vertical world in terms of legacy organizations. When we say bimodal, now we're much more horizontal because we have to move at speed. We have to adapt to the market. Exponential Organizations is a great book, and it talks about those startups, those fine fintech organizations are moving at 10 times the speed of legacy organizations. So we need to start thinking about what do we do in that space. I was reading a book by Jeremy Rifkin, and basically it's a zero marginal cost society. It's a fantastic book, but as I was reading it, I really came across this concept of commons. And commons is the oldest form of institutionalized, self-managed activity. It predates the capitalist market. In other words, the contemporary commons is billions of people engaged in social aspects of, social capital, generating social capital, and it's driven by collaboration, and the interest of groups of people working together. So when I look at these things in the white, these all have implications for the insurance industry. Now, if you look at, for an example, if I look at Internet of Things, everything going to be connected to the Internet. So in the Western world, you may have 1,000 to 5,000 items. Imagine every single item being registered on the Internet of Things. So, and then I combine it with predictive algorithms or automated intelligence. So what does that mean? That's telematics now, and I start looking at the behavior of consumers. So we look at holacracy. It's a new self-managing model. I look at P2P. There's a great example of Lemonade.com, and the P2P didn't quite work, right? So what are the implications in crowdfunding? And I've come back to that whole collaborative point of view. We look at open networks. So these are things that we really need to think about as organizations as we move forward. So this is an example right here, is an industry use case from Australia. And now we're talking about blockchain. I'm not going to get into blockchain, but around the distributed ledger, right, technology. And what we're looking at is an exchange of data more efficiently between reinsurers and insurers. So that's kind of the co-opetition thing that's starting to happen. Organizations are going to have to start collaborating more effectively to get better outcomes. And that means KPMG as well. Our model is being disrupted in terms of tax and audit through automation, et cetera. And so we need to lift our game and start working with organizations like this to remain relevant. So this is my own personal experience. If you look back on your life, if you're old enough, to think about what it was like 20 years ago in the organizations you worked with or for, and how disruptive were they? For example, Pitney Bowes, right? They were a good to great organization, right? And they were a Fortune 100. The point is they were totally tied to the U.S. postal system, and that was the biggest employer about 15 years ago. That's not the case any longer. Totally disruptive. Telstra Clear sold to Vodafone because they didn't have a mobile offering. I used to work in Japan for Alpine Electronics, and I don't know if any of you now have a 6 CD changer in your trunk, but back then that was pretty cool. But I was product development in Japan working for Alpine Electronics. I never thought about the concept of the internet, about everyone being connected like that, and how it disrupts the business model. So what I'm going to talk about is key themes in digital transformation. So I'm kind of digital guy. People come to talk to me about what does digital mean. But the point is, there's something beneath the surface, right? Digital is table stakes. You got to get to where you can. The key around digital, this is the key. The reason digital transformation or digital in organizations are so important is because you have to be adaptive to the market. Without that infrastructure and the ability to be agile and move quickly, you're in trouble. And one of the key things I've discovered through my journey is around you've got to prioritize people and culture. That is critical in terms of the transformation journey. Understanding the key drivers. We're all making assumptions every day. Alistair talked about assumptions. That's my big thing, is we need to look at the counter assumptions, and we need to let go of what we think is going to unfold in the future without examining it more clearly. And then the commitment to innovation. It's something we have to do. We don't have a choice if we want to maintain relevance. And the linkage is collaboration. It's something I think that organizations need to explore. So what I do in my day job is I work with organizations not to predict the future, but to contextualize the future, just as a kind of a context of this is what it looks like, where are we moving, what assumptions are we making, because we're always making assumptions. Let's highlight those assumptions, let's reveal those, and think about what are some of the counter assumptions, or what do we need to do to remain competitive. So the priorities, people and culture. Digital transformation is an organizational and human capital commitment. It's not a technology commitment. The change management is the most important investment you ever make. It's not by chance that about 75% of transformations fail. My view of that is it's about taking the people on the journey, the culture. I mean, at the end of the month, we look at our finances, don't we? How well are we doing? What are we doing about people and culture? Because they're going to take us to the journey in terms of where we need to go to. Digital transformation, understanding the key drivers. It's a means, not an end. So this is from AIA in Australia. We don't think of it just as digital transformation. We're driving to an end-to-end business transformation. What does that look like? And the commitment to innovation. Innovation is now the top measure. We've got to be committed to what that change looks like. So one thing is certain. Change as we adapt to a digital world. This isn't new. It's been around for a while, but the pace is, and it's really hard for us to get our head around. So this is me 25 years ago. So I'm in India hanging out. It's really awkward when people say one-eye jokes because I got one eye. You know, they say, don't be so one-eyed about this, Steve. And I'm like, okay, let that go. But the point is, 25 years ago, my way of communicating was I was writing letters to family and friends. And then I would also occasionally come across a phone booth or something and communicate. Now, if I wrote everyone a letter and said, by the way, in 25 years, this is what it's going to look like. Through this little device that I have in my pocket, I'm going to be able to connect with over half the world's population real time, send photos, pictures, real-time text, stream video. In fact, I'm going to have access to almost all the world's information on this little device. And there's going to be drones flying through the air and automated vehicles. And people would say, you're in India, Steve, smoking a lot of that. They would be pretty dismissive of it. But the reality, 25 years, if we step back, we backcast, and we look at what's happening, we get a sense of the future. So I'll put it in different terms. In the 20th century, we were linear. The 21st century is exponential, and I know a lot of people use this. So you're finance people. If I put a proposal to you on the table and say, okay, here's the deal. I'll give you $1 million today, or I'll give you $1 and it doubles every day for 31 days. Which do you take? I love this participation in the audience, right? Like, I'm not going to answer that. The reality is, after 15 days, it's about 16 grand, right? But after 31 days, it's $1 billion. So that's what happens with exponential, but we can't get our head around what that means. So let me ask another question to put it in real terms. Which of you, show me a sign of hands for those of you that have owned a Nokia or BlackBerry in the past. Now, if you look around, you almost see every single hand up. Now, you know where this is going. Who owns a Nokia or BlackBerry today? Now you're almost ashamed. There's one guy kind of like maybe. No, it's cool. It's coming back, Nokia, but about, 8 phones or 10 phones, whatever. The point is, when it hits an exponential, this is the key. When exponential hits, it's too late. It's gone. Nokia, billion-dollar organization. BlackBerry, billion-dollar organization. Gone. Right? So that's why I'm coming back in terms of talking about why it's so critical to innovate and adapt to the market. So I was doing a presentation, a workshop with an organization. They said, Steve, it's always been that way. It's always been disruptive. So I show this highlight this is the S-curve. So back in the day, I would have done work with New Zealand Post. They would have enjoyed this for about 85 years where, hey, it worked pretty well, right? Now, if I look back, this is what I refer to as the cycle of obsolescence. The average lifespan of a company listed in the S&P 500 in the 1920s was 67 years. Again, you're smart people. You see where I'm going with this. In 1965, it was 33 years. And the average lifespan of a company listed in the S&P is 15 years. Okay, yeah, there's mergers, some go bankrupt, whatever. But what I'm trying to impress upon you is the speed of change. And how do we have to adapt to that, and what do we need to do? So my fundamental premise is that we need to think differently. We need to let go of assumptions, and we're going to let go of what we know in the past and move forward into the future that we don't know. Very difficult, because I imagine most of you in this room are very successful with the way you've done things. So this right here, transformation, what is it? A to B. Change that is uncomfortable. So anybody that goes through this right here is a picture of failure, right? Why? Because most organizations think that we're going to go from A to B and we have a big project plan. And then we wonder why 75% of major transformations fail, because this is the model right here. Now, IDEO is the leading global design thinking organization. So Air New Zealand, they want to redesign their planes. They're going to hire these guys. They're going to fly out, and they're going to say, okay, we want to design your stuff. And they charge a lot of money. The point is, the CEO founder said the one thing that every project has in common is that graph. Right? I think that's pretty credible. Because what happened is we start with hope and we see confidence, but what happens when we start going down that slope? We panic and we retreat to our comfort zone again. So the reality is we got to understand what that curve means to us as an organization and how we adapt and how we have the courage to think differently and move forward in that model. So what is the key to change? Now I'm starting to get deep on you. You have to think about this. This is the success of the intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. And this is from Bill O'Brien, the former CEO of Hanover Insurance. For me, that's deeply profound in terms of kind of letting go and the condition and that mental state of leadership today. So this is what I was back in the States with Otto Schrammer, who's got this concept called Theory U, and it's around transformation. I won't spend but a minute or two on the slide, but observing, going back to Alistair's point, attend with your mind wide open, be aware of the assumptions. What are the assumptions I'm making about the future? Be completely aware of. And then as we start to move through this model, we have to start letting go of those things that have worked in the past. So he did a bunch of research. He went around and looked at the 150 top leaders around the world. He was like, what do you have in common? And what the commonality that he saw, one of them was that they looked to the emergent future. That's what they were letting go of that past success and starting to shift and starting to let occur what would in terms of transformational organization. So how do we make the shift? The biggest part of our digital transformation is changing the way we think. I know, and I don't know if this resonates with any of you. If you get a breakthrough, like, that's really difficult, really, really difficult, because we're creatures of habit and patterns. So we now need to start taking in all these global trends. We look at the risks that Alistair talked to us about, but there are so many more risks. I would advocate that one of the biggest risks is not understanding what our future assumptions are in that business model and just playing it safe today. So we got to look at what are the impacts here on our industry, climate change. This is from the World Economic Forum. These are global trends. So what I would like to work with customers is putting up, this is just a simple model, an indication, but what we really need to understand in terms of our business model as we're working through transformation is what items, what trends, uncertainties, events, what are highly certain and will have a high impact. So I'm assuming that you're all doing this already, and those are built into your strategic model. So the thing is, it's really difficult, really, really difficult, because you got all this stuff that you got to figure out and prioritize. And if I look at what are the biggest obstacles to new thinking, too busy, lack of time. That's the highest popularity response and the most important obstacle. You guys have so much to do with your BAU today. How in the heck do I spend more time working on innovation and reimagining what that future will with products and services? Well, other people are. So what do? Well, nothing, because change is hard. And by the way, I'm not a cynic, really. I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but a lot of organizations do this. Nothing. And I get it, because it's really hard. This is an example. 2011, the top 4 coal companies in the U.S. had a market cap of $33 billion. Their strategy probably was, I don't know, I didn't do a lot of research on this. Their strategy probably was, let's wait it out. She'll come right. 2017, the top 4 coal companies have a market cap of $150 million. They lost a little bit of money. So what are they doing in those 6 years? Nothing. But that kind of reinforces stagnation is fatal. You need to get that message. I love this one. Instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. And I know it hurts. I'm not being offensive because I realize how hard your job is in terms of the current environment with fintech, insurtech, and the speed of change. It's very hard, but we have to do it. So the best way to predict the future is to create it. So there's multiple futures out there, right? What we need to identify is what is the future we're going to play into and understand what those assumptions are and do what we can, knowing that we're going to be wrong, but we start to create a context of what that future looks like, and we start adapting to it. So the sheer pace of change is forcing leadership teams to create a more structured way to anticipate the future. Modern strategy, this is Steve's view, modern strategy is in the conversation. What is the conversation we're having as an organization about our pathway to a future state? Are you constantly asking your firm, here's some questions I put out, who are we serving, and how are their needs changing? Because they're not going to be like they are today. 25%, by 2025, nearly everyone will be regularly shopping online, and I imagine it will be for the services that you're offering. Does the business we are in make sense in the way the world is unfolding? And so this is a great example. In 2000, you can't really see it probably there, but in 2000 it was pure physical. This is the subscription and recorded music industry. But there was zero revenue, and 13 years later, 52% of the revenue comes from subscription and streaming. So it's getting your head around what is the emergent future, how is it changing, and adapting to it as opposed to continue to print or sell CDs. So what assumptions underpin our current business model? So the reality is we always say we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know, right? It's like, therefore, we're making a lot of assumptions about the future. The biggest barrier to strategic renewal is almost always top management's unexamined beliefs. So I'm conscious of time, but I'll cut through a couple of these slides. But what capabilities will be critical to our future success? I think as an organization, we need to start thinking about what those look like. 50% of New Zealand jobs in a decade, gone in a decade. And this is Vic Crone. But if you dismiss that, that's okay. But the World Economic Forum will give you numbers bigger than that, right? Or the economists will talk about numbers. Even if they're half wrong, what does that look like, and how does that impact your business? So the product and service innovation, the kind of last piece I'll talk about is this 3 horizons. And this is just a simple model in terms of as you're starting to understand what that looks like out in the future. So here's the easiest way to look at this model. Horizon 1 is taxi service that we've been traditionally using. Horizon 2 is when Uber totally disrupts that model, but even Uber knows it's the driverless autonomous vehicle in Horizon 3 with electronic vehicles that it looks like. So all we're doing is we need to frame the situation. We need to frame Horizon 3. The last bit about this is that here's our leadership today. And often I'm categorizing it, simplifying it, just to tell a little bit of a story, but we have Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and a Horizon 3 leaderships. So Horizon 1 is, we'll call that the baby boom leaders. They grew up in the pre-disruption era, the architects of existing business models, focus on the status quo, tried and tested management approach. So a lot of that stuff is they've been very, very successful to get us to where we are today. The key is how do we work with the Horizon 2 entrepreneur, actively looking for change, thrive on disruption, eagerly looking for new skills. And then the Horizon 3 is this impatient with the present, open to future possibilities, anticipates the business models of tomorrow. You have those people in your organization, by the way, and there's ideas coming back to the collaboration approach as capturing the voice of frontline staff or your partners or your community, really from an innovation sense, this is really critical. So how we see each other, we want to go from a divergent point of view to converge, but we want to hear those points of view. So this is the key in terms of how we look at each other. Horizon 1 needs to look at the visionary with hope, and the Horizon 1 leader needs to look at the Horizon 2 person with the ideas. And the visionary needs to look back at the Horizon 1 person with heritage, or the Horizon 2 people as an ally. So it's critical in terms of a mindset, in terms of the way we think and the way we use our different perspectives to come up with some solutions. I'll say, last 3 slides is, often this is how we see each other, though. I know a lot of Horizon 3 guys that look back at the current leadership and refer to them as a dinosaur, or refer to the entrepreneur level 2 as compromising. So the critical is that is often a mindset today, is how do we shift that? How do we change that in our mindset in terms of the future? So last 3 slides is, from a transformational point of view, I think ensuing high-impact, high-uncertainty drivers that are identified and captured in the strategic priorities that underpin the future. So essentially what I'm saying is we're all moving into this, I don't know if you can demystify this concept of uncertainty, because we live in a world of volatility and uncertainty, but the point is we need to do the best we can to draw up a picture of what that looks like, knowing that it doesn't exist and that we'll be wrong. The key there is now how do we that creates a context for us in terms of creating product innovation around services. Going back to that earlier slide, there's so much happening out there that will affect and impact your market. How do we find that in that next horizon? And then lastly, going back to that theme that's happening. So I talked about it earlier, there's the capitalist market that's moving, but there's this thing that's outpacing it, and it's where the social entrepreneurial or the collaboration communities. In a sense, you see that with eBay or TradeMe or Airbnb. These are big communities working together, and they're just evolving. Or other models, new business models, that how do we do that in parallel, and how do the two start to merge? What does that look like? How do we engage with the community in a collaborative way? Thank you.